Right now, time to once again visit with Brian Ross and Real News. Brian joins us on a Thursday morning, and we take a look at the stories that are out there for us all to consume one way or the other. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning to you on this rainy morning.
Yeah, and but you know what? The rest of the weekend, right into the weekend after today, looks okay. So,
Wow.
so we can put up with this little bit of rain, especially after what happened in our area last week.
Exactly, and and given the weather around the world and the president's sort of decisions on what's to go forward in terms of climate change, I think we have to really start paying attention.
Well, the whole thing, and I was talking about this with our meteorologist today, we no longer can worry about pushing back climate change. We're now in the position where we have to adapt and go with what's going on, because even if we were to start right now, it will take basically at least a decade to try to reverse some of the things. So right now, all we can do is adapt and react.
Exactly. I see with the Department of Energy is saying that by 2050, half of all the United States electrical supply will come from the solar, which is astounding if they can achieve that. 20 years, 28 years.
It's going to be an interesting situation to watch and see how America's cities that are all basically the major cities are built on a coastline, whether it's the Great Lakes, whether it's the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and or the Pacific Ocean. So it's going to be interesting to see a country, and as a world, how we deal with the fact that, okay, we won't debate about climate change. Now, how do we all survive it and try to reverse it? It's going to be a very interesting period, in not only in this country but in the world.
It's one thing that could unite the world in a sense. It is a common foe, a common enemy we have to all work on. And the question is, will places like China, which use heavy amounts of coal, will they begin to change their ways or not? Will they take advantage? Will they argue that, well, the U.S. and other Western countries had an advantage for a century? We need to have that same advantage.
It's going to be interesting because that huge dam that they built and took, 10 or 15 years to build it, they have now found out that the amount of water that at times builds up behind that huge, incredible project, I'll call it China's Hoover Dam, is now, it can be dangerous because it's totally, their predicted highs are way off for what happens now with climate change. So I think China can be moved fairly easily into getting off of coal once they find that out. It's going to be interesting because it can't be just us. It has to be China and us. It really does.
Exactly, and it's essentially it's like fighting COVID. The whole world has to be safe before any one country is safe. If other countries are having a terrible problem, we're going to have one here too. So it's something that the world needs to unite around, and let's hope that happens.
Well, look at the way we're handling COVID. It doesn't give you much room for hope. I shouldn't say that, but it really is true. There's not much room for hope with the world all coming together right now, unless something strange really happens. That's all I can say.
We see the divisions in our country over. First of all, there have been huge pushback on the effort to go solar, to use wind power from the sort of coal and the fossil fuel lobbyists who are still pushing that's this is a mistake to go solar. We can't do it, and then you see the same group organized around the vaccinations and the masks, and just stunning how politics seems to get in the way of common sense.
Well, that and that's the whole thing. So And unfortunately, that's just not a problem in our country. It's a problem, obviously. That's all across,
right.
Yeah,
right.
All across the face of the political scheme. Well, the one good news is that the Taliban, and they're kind of forced into this because they're already reacting to women who are protesting against them. They have cleared Americans for flights out of Kabul that have just showed their paper. But they're in that tricky position now where they're going to have to be careful for a little while, but it will return to the same Taliban within the next several months. There's not going to be any change there, and it's Afghanistan, unfortunately.
It is, and we've already seen evidence that they are returning to their view of the world, which is a view of like the Dark Ages, the 7th century is where they want to be. Women have been beaten for protesting, and there have been random reports of people executed on the spot for challenging the Taliban. So tough times ahead there.
All right, so now we've got facing President Biden not only COVID now and the fallback from what happened at the end of the war in Afghanistan, which, by the way, I know it's not pretty and I know it's horrible and it was mishandled, but it was something that had to be done. But there's so much going on now with, once again, COVID raising its ugly head one way or the other in this country. And then you have a couple of spending packages, and then you have Joe Manchin thrown in the middle of all this trying to really raise his stakes. And we've got a pretty big mess in Washington right now.
Oh my gosh! Well, we always seem to have that, and Joe Manchin is flexing his muscles, and with that narrow margins that the Democrats have. Everybody's got to be on board, so anybody really can be the troublemaker, and that's what Manchin has chosen to do. And what he's asking for would just really completely undercut the Biden package, and in this huge proposal, there are so many things there that would be real changing for this country. I'm struck by the fact that the reduction in poverty and the reduction in hunger in this country in just a year, given the various proposals from Biden, and before the previous administration, how we can affect child poverty, how we can affect people who are really hungry, and that is possible. And let's hope that continues, because it's shown that for the first time there is a way to solve this problem. And it goes against Republicans are always saying that if you give people a handout like that, they're lazy ultimately and they won't work. I don't think that's true, and I think some of what's happened has proved that.
It's and I actually took a look at the list that Manchin has put, and it's obvious he's put his list together that can be whittled down, so they can negotiate with him and whittle down his list to show that he can get a victory. But still, the whole process of this is people, once again, instead of looking for their own power, have to look at what's best for the country, and that's just not seemed to be practiced by a lot of senators or I'll even say congresspeople nowadays. Just
right, and of course the disputes here are going to be within the Democratic Party. That's the area. I mean, the Republicans have already said there's not a single one who will vote for this. So they need to have all Democrats on board for this to work. And let's hope the health holds out for a lot of the very elderly Democratic senators.
And to take a look at the leading rulers of Taliban, some of them are still on the U.S. International Terrorism List.
Right. Some of them, were part of the Taliban members who were released by the U.S. in exchange for the U.S. Army Sergeant Bo Berdahl. And, they now have returned to run that country, I guess.
All right, and I don't know if you saw the videos of this. I saw it on YouTube. The North Koreans had a huge parade, like Russia and North Korea and other countries, but they had hundreds and thousands of soldiers in hazmat suits, obviously preparing their country for bad news about COVID-19.
I had not seen that, but of course that's the such a sort of a hermit country. Who knows what's going to happen there?
Yeah, it was once again their 73rd anniversary, and I think they're just getting people used to the fact. But then again, when you run a country that tightly, I don't think you have to get the people that produced. So now, one final question to you, Brian, as someone who sits there and has watched things happen over the years in news and in politics, I have to ask you, is there any possibility, really, that climate change, instead of now reacting and spending billions of dollars to prevent what's going to happen to our cities, is there any real possibility that there's going to be action in this country with Republicans and Democrats, or once again, is this just another kick the can down the road?
Well, it's not quite kick the can down the road, but the progress is unlikely to be as dramatic as it needs to be, and that's because you've got to get essentially a consensus, and this is where big money talks in Washington, and the fossil fuel industry with their lobbyists continue to push back many of the proposals that would essentially help us adapt to the change. Oil and coal are powerful industries, and they are not going to give up easily the way they make their money.
And the sad thing about that is, I think everybody, even the climate change people that want to push it, realize that for right now, you have to mix oil and coal. That has to be in the mix right now. But it also is the opportunity for those companies which have major resources to also find ways that they can get into the mix with solar power, wind power, battery power.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
They should take the time to know that they've still got this segment of the market and invest in other segments. It really, I'm no economist, I'm no genius, but it just seems so apparent to me.
Right. Well, if you were only making horseshoes, you'd want to get into the car business at the turn of the century. And one of the areas where change has been pushed against these companies is from investors, huge pension funds run by universities or retired employees. These investors are demanding that those companies essentially go green. And this has been a real force pushing these companies to where they should be in terms of dealing with this issue.
It's one of the many things that we have facing us. But, Brian, it's always great to speak to you on a Thursday. Have yourself a great rest of the week and weekend, and we'll speak to you next week.
You too. Always great to be here, Marshall.
Take care, Ryan. Brian Ross and Real News this morning here on The Breakfast Club on Robin Hood Radio.